In this video, I'm taking you through how to make the viewfinders that are found inside of the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. We happen to be going through this book together inside of the Paint With Me community, and this question came up because the instructions, as it turns out, are a little bit confusing. So I'm going to share them here on YouTube in case anyone else is going through this book and is having trouble as well. So let's get started with the supplies. So the supplies that I'm using are the 2 pieces of black construction paper. And I'm also going to be using a razor blade instead of a scissors, but you could use scissors. And so I have a straight edge ruler as well. And I'm going to be using a pencil, but because I'm showing this to you on video, I'm going to be using a white pencil. You, of course, can just use a regular pencil. And then you're going to need your picture plane with a Sharpie marker or a dry erase marker so that you can mark the crosshairs on it. So I've already done that on mine. So let's get started with making the actual viewfinders. Okay, so I'm going to be reading these instructions and kind of clarifying them as we go. So I'm just going to move the book off to the side. And the first part of the instructions are to cut the 2 pieces of paper down to 8 by 10. So my viewfinder is an 8 by 10 as she instructs inside of the book. So if I measure it with my ruler or just with my cutting mat, because my mat is at increments of 1 inch, so you can have you can count it if you want, but the ruler says that it's 10 by 8. So my picture plane is a 10 by 8, and then I'm going to go and cut my paper down so that it matches. So I have 2 sheets here and I'll do both of them. If you have a cutter, then this is going to make it a lot easier. I have one too, but since I'm just using my razor blade, I'll just do this here. So we have 10 inches. And so I can just kind of use the grid lines on my cutting mat to know. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is going to end up at the 14 mark. Another way to know this for me is I just cut off 2 inches from the long side because mine is actually a 9 by 12. So I just have to cut off 2 inches to make it 10. And then I'm going to cut off 1 inch from this side to make it an 8. I'll just double check that that's right. Okay, yeah, it's measuring 9. So I just have to cut off 1 inch. I like using these cutting mats because they have these grid lines on it and it really helps me cut without having to draw a lot of extra stuff. So you can see I can just line up the ruler against the 13, which is where it just happens to be where I am right now. But if I shift this up so you can see, I just line up the ruler with the rest of the edge up at the top. And then it just lets me cut without actually having to draw an extra line. Cut that down. That's an 8 by 10 now. And then I'm going to do the next one. So I'm going to cut 2 inches off the end. And then I'm going to cut 1 inch off of this side, and then we'll have 2 8 by 10s. And the whole point of these viewfinders based on the book is that the inner square that we're cutting out is proportional to the outer square. So basically it's an 8 by 10. We're just like making a smaller square inside that's proportional to the outer dimensions. That's how I read the instructions. So that's why the method that she is describing in text, it kind of doesn't really work. And I'm going to show you why as we draw it. So let's do the first one first. So that was step 2 was cut 2 8 by 10 inch pieces. And then it says 3 on both pieces, use pencil, draw diagonal lines from corner to corner crossing in the middle. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take my ruler and a white pencil. Just so that this is just so you can see. I just happen to have a white pencil, but you can just use regular pencil. Okay, so I'm going to draw this diagonal line, and then this diagonal line, Okay. So then the instructions now say that on one piece, which is one piece, one viewfinder, so we're going to do the first viewfinder first, draw vertical and horizontal lines 2 inches from the edge. And it says, again, connecting the lines at points on the diagonals. And then it says to cut out the inner rectangle. So if you followed it in the sense of, okay, I want to draw 2-inch lines from the top, right, horizontally and vertically. So first we'll do a horizontal, that's 2 inches. So again, my units on my cutting mat are 2 inches, so 1, 2. So if I drew a line like this, right, and that's horizontal, and then I drew a vertical, that's 2 inches from the other edge, like this, you can see that none of these lines cross, and that gets really confusing because what we're trying to do is find an intersection so we know where our inside box is. So mathematically, it was pointed out to me, which was very, very helpful by one of my members, that mathematically this doesn't work out, because if what we're trying to do is achieve a proportional inner rectangle to the outer, then an 8 by 10, let me see if I can write this down here. And if we have a 8-inch by 10-inch piece of a paper frame, then proportionally, if we shrunk it 2 inches from every side, we would end up with a 6 by 8. And a 6 by 8 is not proportional to an 8 by 10. Actually, a proportional dimension is 6.4 inches by 8 inches. That's going to be proportional for the larger rectangle, and then for the smaller one, it's going to be a 4.8 inch by 6 inch, which is the one we're working on right now, right? Because we're trying to make a smaller rectangle, which is she's telling us to go in 2 inches from the edge, vertically and horizontally, and that's what's not working. So what we're looking for at this moment is this one. We're looking for a 4 by 8 inch by 6 inch rectangle. And going in 2 inches from the edge on each edge isn't going to work. So what I did was I did a little bit of math, and I found out that for the 2-inch one, we can get the top edge to come in 2 inches, but then the this edge is not going to be 2 inches. It's actually going to be about 1 and I think it's 5/8. So let's try that, okay? So I'm going to take this paper, and then I will go 2 inches from the top. Oh, I guess I didn't have to erase that. Okay, so we're gonna do 2 inches from the top, okay? And we're going to go, I think, 2 inches from the bottom, because again, like I had on my little cheat sheet, it is a 6 inch, right? So we can do 2 from the top and 2 from the bottom, and that's gonna leave us 6 inches in the middle, which is the right dimension that we're looking for. So 2 inches from the top and 2 inches from the bottom. And I'm just, again, using my little cutting board is really useful because I don't have to actually measure. I can just look at where the lines are and then draw it straight across. Okay, so I have 2 inch by 2 inch, 2 inches and then 2 inches. So that is basically going to leave us 6 inches here. So we have our 6 inches. So now we have to figure out what's going on inside, because what we want to be left with is 4.8 inches, which it looks like it's going to be about 1 inch and 5/8. So it's right here on my ruler. And then we're going to see where it intersects. You actually don't have to measure this like this, what I'm doing right here. You don't need to know. You can just take your paper at this point. If you're doing this, you don't have to measure it. If you're following along with me, just draw those 2 lines. And then what you want to do is find the intersection. So this is, I think maybe the instructions would be helpful if it just said, oh, draw the, on the vertical portrait aspect of it, just draw 2 inches from the top and 2 inches from the bottom, and then find the intersection, and that might be a great way to do it. So you can see how I can basically, I can see where these 2 are intersecting, and then I'm just going to put my ruler right there and connect those 2 dots. And then we can measure it actually and see what happens. So that should be about 1 and 5/8. Yeah, so it's 1 and 5/8. It's where I marked this white line. So again, we're gonna do, or the white dot. So I'm gonna do that again and connect the top and the bottom here. Okay. And then we're gonna connect that, and that is gonna give us the square that we actually want. Okay, and so before I cut this, let's do the next one. So this is now a 4.8 inch by 6 inch square on the inside. So this dimension here is 4.8 inches. Okay, and then this dimension here is 6 inches, and that's going to be proportional to the 8 by 10. So let's do the next one. And the next one is what we want to end up with is, again, a 6.4 by 8 inch. It says in the instructions on step number 5, on the second piece, which is this piece, draw vertical and horizontal lines 1 inch from the edge. So now she wants 1 inch from the edge, but let's see if that works. I don't think that's going to work because what we want is an 8 inch by 6.4. So again, vertically, in the long way, going from a 10 to an 8, that's right. It's a 1 inch, right? So we're going to do a vertical. So instead of doing vertical and horizontal lines, what we're going to do is just do the horizontal lines in this case, since we're looking at it as a portrait view, right? So let's do the diagonals first. Okay. Just like the last one. Okay. Okay. So we have our diagonals, and then what we're going to do is measure 1 inch from the top and bottom, which will leave us the 8 inches that we want. And the 8 goes along with the 10 inch dimension. Okay, let's leave this here so you can see it. Okay. So we're going 1 inch from the bottom and 1 inch from the top. That's going to leave us our 8 inches here, okay? And then what we need is 6.4 inches, and that's kind of hard to measure. But we don't really have to measure it because we can just use the intersections that we have right there and there. And we're gonna line up those two and then draw a straight line. Same here. Here, and then we're going to just draw a straight line connecting where these two lines are already intersected. Okay, and that's going to give us, this is about 3/4 from the edge. So it's not an inch, it's 3/4 from the edge. So following the instructions and doing 1 inch from all sides would not have had these lines intersect. So this is now, should be 6.4 inches. So this is more proportional. And obviously, because this is for drawing or just making viewfinders, it doesn't have to be exact math. We don't need to exactly 0.4 or exactly 0.8, but just following the instructions is a little confusing because if you followed them as you saw, the lines don't actually intersect like this. So hopefully this is helpful for you, that you can see that in order to get the proportions, we kind of have to do it a little bit differently. So again, this is about 6.4 by 8 inches, and the top and the bottom are 1 inch, and on this one, the top and the bottom are 2 inches, but the sides are not. So 2 inches, 2 inches, 1 inch, 1 inch, but the sides are not what it says in the book, okay? So now what I'm going to do is just cut them out. So you can use scissors, or you can do it with a straight edge and a razor blade like I'm doing. All right, and here is my smaller viewfinder. Again, I can flip it over if I don't want all of the lines. And then lastly, after you have drawn your crosshairs, you basically just go in the middle, 2 lines, and then what you can do is take this, and then you should be able to clip them on with the binder clips like this and use them for the exercises. So there's the large one, and then here's what this smaller one would look like. So hopefully that was helpful in that you ended up with 2 viewfinders that we can use for the exercises. So let me just do one last thing for you so you have a little bit of guideline. And I will measure the distances so that you know exactly what to mark when you are drawing yours. So again, you're going to be 2 inches from the top, 2 inches from the bottom, the long way. on the smaller viewfinder, and then the two sides are going to be 1 and 5/8. Now this is approximate, and this is only if you want to know the dimensions. You don't need these two once you have the top and the diagonals, because then you can just mark by eyeball. You don't actually need to measure, but it's here for you if you need it. Now that is the small one. Big one will be 1 inch from the top, and then from the sides you are cutting, you're measuring about 3/4. Okay, so if you measure 3/4 inch from the side, if you're measuring. If you don't want to measure, then all you do is draw the top and bottom and then eyeball where those two intersect, the diagonal and the top line, and then you mark or cut your verticals. Okay, so hopefully this is going to give you the proportions you need. You should end up with a hole here that is 6.4 inch by 8 inch. Here you should end up with one that is a 4.8 by 6 inch. I hope that video was helpful. I filmed it for the members of my community. I am in no way a certified instructor or anything for this book. It's just a book that we happen to be going through together in a book club format, and this question came up because the instructions were a little bit confusing, and so I hope that me posting it here helps somebody else if you're going through the book yourself and you're finding it to be a little bit tricky to make these viewfinders.